our distinguished guests, industry leaders, policymakers, and visionaries present here today. My name is RJ Pallavi, and it is my absolute honor to welcome you all to Invest Karnataka 2025, the Global Investor Meets, where ideas turn into action, partnership take shape, and Karnataka continues to lead the way in all innovation and investment. Yesterday, of course, we have witnessed thought-provoking discussions, groundbreaking announcements, and inspiring collaborations. And today, we will be taking that momentum forward with even more insightful sessions, strategic dialogues, and of course, high-impact networking opportunities. So get ready for a power-packed day of knowledge, of opportunities and connections that will define the next chapter of Karnataka's growth story. Before I introduce our next panelists, just a couple of announcements. We would be felicitating all of our speakers, our panelists, so I would request all of you to please remain in the hall once the panel discussion is over. And also, I would like to invite all of you for our SME Connect Award ceremony, where we will be celebrating innovation and excellence, and this will happen at the main plenary hall at 6 p.m. this evening. That said, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to our discussion for the day. Our first session is Reimagining Intelligence Using Core AI for the Transformative Future. And our moderator for this session is Michelle Hennessy, Graphic Detail Editor from The Economist. She is a Graphic Detail Editor at The Economist, and she leads the publication's data visualization and infographic efforts, and she has a keen eye for storytelling through data and design. Her work has been recognized for its clarity and impact, and she's sought-after speaker on data visualization and journalism. So ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause as I would like to invite Michelle on stage, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name's... the microphone had something to say. My name is Michelle Hennessy, editor of The Economist Graphic Detail. It's great to have you with us all here today. Now, artificial intelligence is shaping industries, economies, and societies, and core AI, including machine learning, natural language processing, and computer vision, is driving automation and decision-making. But as AI becomes deeply embedded in critical sectors, it also brings profound challenges, ethical dilemmas, workforce disruptions, and governance complexities. This panel looks at reimagining intelligence using core AI for a transformative future. We'll explore how AI can be leveraged for innovation while ensuring public trust and inclusivity, the role of businesses, researchers, and policymakers in shaping AI's evolution, and how industries can integrate AI responsibly, unlocking its full potential while addressing societal concerns. Joining me in this discussion today, we have Dominik Heinrich, the Global Head of AI Design at the Coca-Cola Company. He's also the Adjunct Professor of AI Design at the Pratt Institute and co-founder of the Creative AI Academy. We have Manish Gupta, the Senior Director of Google DeepMind, Caleb Munigety, the Head of Bosch India Enterprise AI, Avinash Joshi, the Chief Executive of India NTT Data, and Ranganath Sadasiva, Chief Technology Officer at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Please, everyone, put your hands together for our fantastic panel. It's great to have you with us here today, everyone. Let's jump straight in, and I want to talk a bit about the implementation of AI in different companies. So, Caleb, why don't we start with you? How do you spot specific ways in which AI can be useful in companies and to build a roadmap?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. When we look at the various sectors that are getting affected by the usage of AI in a positive manner, it's just not one sector. It's many sectors that are getting improved with respect to their operational efficiencies that are there. Just to name a few, if you look at the health sector, so the drug discovery is getting faster, right? The personalized medication is being leveraged quite a lot by the people. who are using AI. And of course, the medical diagnostics is another thing. And if you look at the manufacturing sector as such, you see there the kind of use cases that we have in the manufacturing sector, especially to do some prognostics, the diagnostics of the machinery that is there, that existing. We can actually predict when could be the downtime of the machinery that is running, and we can save a good amount of money if we put there. It's also getting into retail, e-commerce, where hyper-personalization is picking up quite rapidly. The supply chain optimization that comes into picture, massive gains if one can deploy AI. But one word of caution here, when we are putting AI in the center to do all of this efficiency gains, right? At the end of the day, it's a kind of a tool that we are using as an enabler. But at the end of the day, the decision makings that happen, right, in the boardrooms and all of that, also have to do with the experiential relevance of the people when they are looking at the real world cases. I give this classic example wherein you can end up having a simple optimization problem with good conducive constraints to solve it, but you can also have an optimization problem which has conflicting constraints and conflicting objectives, and then you end up having an NP-hard problem where there is no solution from the tools. That's where I think the experience added to the enablement of the AI will be making a big difference in these various sectors that I talked about. So that's
Dominik, I want to bring you in here as well. So AI is so all-encompassing. How do you find specific solutions for AI in different companies?
Usually, I would say, I think there's this misconception that technology can solve all the problems, and you start with the technology first and you look at that. And I think one of the biggest ways, or the best ways to do it, and I think we heard Sebastian saying the same thing about have a problem and really dive in. And so what we do with the students, what we do at Creative AI, what we do at Coke, is basically we look at your workflow and start with something super simple, which is very human. What's the desired outcome in your workflow? And then we all have barriers. Some of them are very human barriers and can't be solved by machines, but there's others that can be really easily solved. So understanding what is my desired outcome, what's my barrier, what's my challenge, and then identifying what an AI can do actually to overcome this is the way we go after this, and what I teach as well. It's like, because I feel like a lot of this needs to be very natural and needs to come from a human perspective in order to actually work.
And it's not just the company level, but also at the financing level, the government level, the research level. Manish, what steps do you think need to be taken for all of them so that AI works for everyone?
Yeah, so while I agree at some level, Dominik, with your statement that start with that problem, just to make it interesting, I'll also partially disagree, because I think a lot of very useful technologies come out of just sheer exploration, right, of kind of this whole research space and so on. So some example, one very interesting example, and one of the, I think, underappreciated areas where AI is going to make a transformative impact is in science, acceleration of scientific discovery. And in fact, this year's Nobel Prize in chemistry in particular ought to be that signal of things to come. Yes, Demis Hassabis and others, they did have that problem in mind. Protein folding was this really hard problem. It used to take an entire PhD, about 5 years of work, before you uncovered the structure of a single protein. But the actual progress on it got made after they kind of first perfected that technology, right, on AlphaGo, this reinforcement learning based systems. And once they applied it to AlphaGo, they said, can we apply it in other areas? And it turned out that they had an amazingly accurate solution for the protein folding problem. They didn't develop those algorithms initially with just the protein folding application in mind. So that's one example. The other thing which my team does a lot, especially in India, is how do we make AI truly benefit everyone, each and every one of us? So we've seen huge gaps, right, between the capabilities of these LLMs on languages like English versus, let's say, most other languages of the world, right, including Indian languages, right? We have so many of them. So So we've been doing a lot of work on how do you build those multilingual capabilities. And we also pointed out it's just not important to only understand language. You also need to understand different cultures. If you're responding to a user in Japanese, you shouldn't come up with the response in English and simply translate that into Japanese. You should come up with the response rooted in the cultural context, right, of Japanese culture. So how do you make these models understand different cultures? And of course, how do you make them scale? Because today, I mean, we are seeing, again, all these nuclear reactors and so on being built to power all these AI systems. I would say our teams in India in particular have been at the forefront of really developing a whole bunch of techniques like Matryoshka models and tandem transformers and treeformers and so on, which have gone into our Gemini models to really make them far more energy efficient. And I think a lot more needs to be done. So these are just some examples.
Just one fun fact on this. We did a campaign with Santa this year where you could actually call Santa and tell your most famous holiday story or Christmas story. And we did it in all languages. We used, I think, a bunch of technologies out there. I'm not sure we used yours. No, I know we didn't. But I think what's interesting about the culture, what you said, is that we actually figured out that in Japan, Santa speaks fluent Japanese with an English accent. So we could have just used AI to actually emulate that, making him speak Japanese. But we also knew the cultural nuances of that and actually embedded that. And I agree with you, that's the crucial part that comes in that is so important to actually make it realistic and make it engaging and actually understand the cultural nuances beyond the technology to just giving you an answer. So I just wanted to build on that because I think that's such an important point which we sometimes forget when we use the technology.
Avinash.
I mean, I just want to go back to, few of the issues or points what raised is about drug discovery or life sciences. But I think there are also early use cases about as simple as client interactions, a customer experience. India, you have a huge call center industry, and what we have observed is there is a significant, reduction in cost you could achieve by using AI in the whole call center interaction. I think that's making a substantial, tangible benefits to both on the cost side, but also on the experience side. And so if you extend that, it's also then available for, let's say, employees of large organizations for whatever information they require. I think AI is coming into picture. Now you extend that to, let's say, students. Students require information about curriculum, courses, what have you, right? I think that's another area where we are seeing some early use cases being deployed. And it's also interesting because, especially in India, you just can't use only English. You will have to use probably 27, 28 different languages. But there is a potential there, I guess, to
I want to pivot to talking about regulation, which has been a huge topic of discussion in Paris this week, and how to put up guardrails to safeguard AI while not stifling innovation. Ranganath, what are your thoughts on that?
Firstly, good morning to all, namaskara. The point that we're discussing about AI in India, and I work with a lot of customers and enterprises to ensure AI is onboarded. I see a very simple problem in terms of taking AI to scale. I think the initial experimentation around AI is all done. The small use case that we're talking of is already done. But if you were to look at AI projects, enterprise adoption in India and in the US perhaps, I have a single problem that people don't trust AI in India as much as they do in the US. That's leading up to a lot of projects really getting into that ROI and discussions around that. And also the use case access and the use case driven model seems to be moving towards just developing a platform that enables multiple use cases, right? You just can't have a very pointed approach to all of this. And you know that the use cases are going to transform. In Bangalore, people have noticed that we had a surveillance camera and how that really transformed into multiple additions, add-ons that were needed for the use case to be really benefit. So in that context, taking an approach that's more horizontal and enabling a platform with the data sources and other things really helps. And then you get into the issue of how we want to govern that. And I strongly endorse the point that AI is still a toddler here, and we should not be coming out with diet charts for them.
So we've seen from Paris that trying to get every country to agree to the same framework is going to be a challenge, to put it lightly. Does there need to be a global framework, or can there be different regulations at the country level? Avinash?
I mean, I can't think about a situation where we won't have a global framework, or I think it will be too dangerous not to have one common understanding across countries, communities as a framework. It's difficult to have it because then you have more stakeholders coming in, and to get them all together in one direction is going to be difficult. But I think there is a strong need for having such framework. Having said that, we also have to be cognizant about the social nuances for each cultures or countries. What's socially acceptable in, let's say, Japan or UK may not necessarily be acceptable in Brazil or in India. So we also will have to think about, within the garbs of the global framework, what individual countries need to be sensitive about, what is accepted. I mean, right now we have a bit of a controversy going on about one such issue right now in India, on different topic. But that kind of reminds all of us that you need a global framework, and you also will have to think about the country or local cultural nuances.
On the regulatory frameworks part, right? Why do we in the first place require a regulatory framework? Because we are worried about if there is something harmful that is going to come out of AI. In these sort of aspects, right, I'm reminded of a conversation between two philosophers. One was a big proponent of either or theory. The other was a big proponent of both this and that theory. So it's as simple as that. You choose and pick one or the other, or you pick up both of them. And one of the philosophers who was proponent of this either this or that theory asked the guy who was a proponent of both this and theory to pick up between these two choices. So the philosopher said that I will always go with both this and that. Then the first philosopher said that even though you are a big proponent of it, and if you are given a choice to choose both, you only pick one, right? So the dichotomy is that we are always used to this kind of an either this or that philosophy. But when it comes to the regulatory framework, when I look at it, it should be a global framework that has to be there, because there should be a common understanding how it goes, right? But at the same time, we should also look at how the regional things are playing out. So both intertwined will give us a good framework is how I see it. And it should not be a finger pointing, because this is a kind of a space which is not so much chartered all around. We are also learning with the things that we are doing on a day-to-day basis. The experience matters. The knowledge dissemination, the deliberations, the discussions that should happen across the multiple stakeholders will actually give us a good way of coming up with this sort of regulatory frameworks is what my thought process is.
Sorry, just to add, and I forgot to mention this. We I think recently published a report, and it shows something interesting, that on the technology side, on the innovation side, I think everybody is convinced that it is moving at phenomenal pace. And at the same time, I think most of the CXOs, they think that there is a gap in terms of is the full impact of this well understood yet by all of us? And I think the honest answer is we all are trying to figure that out. And that's why I think why there's a need for, can we have some reference framework so that we all start becoming conscious about it? So I think that's something which I think is an important topic for policymakers, leaders will have to think about, probably.
With the global perspective, where is India in the AI race? So it has all the potential in terms of there's no shortage of workers. I hope you can all still hear me. But there's no shortage of workers. There's a huge market for AI consumption. Where is India's OpenAI? Where is India's DeepSeek? Manish?
So I think there's already a lot of talent in India in terms of AI-ready workforce. India is already amongst the leaders internationally. And there's a very large number of AI developers who are developing AI-based solutions, both for India as well as those who develop solutions for the rest of the world. So that way, I think there's a very thriving AI ecosystem. Of course, you raise the question of where's the equivalent, right, of DeepSeek. And again, I've been proposing this for a long time that that it's not a choice of either or, right? Taking cue from what you just said, we have to do both in India. And I don't think we have seen the final word in how do you build ultimately the most powerful AI models. LLMs, today's models are a great step forward, but do they represent the final solution to really building the ultimate AGI kind of systems? I think we can do better. If we think about just energy consumption, right? We look at the number of whatever nuclear reactors it takes to power these systems compared with human brain. Human brain does it at about 20 watts. So there's got to be better ways of building these models. So which is why I think there ought to be more innovation in India also in better ways of building. We shouldn't just assume, oh, it'll take at least whatever $1 billion to build such systems. And since we don't have $1 billion, and by the way, we do have $1 billion if we truly wanted to, if we had that risk-taking appetite, we do have those $1 billion to spend. But rather than taking that view, oh, it'll take that much money and let's not waste it, I think just use those constraints and within those constraints come up with ways of building highly energy efficient, highly cost-effective systems. And I think finally, with DeepSeek having shown kind of that it can be done, I think we see now a lot of movement towards doing it. But I wish we had those guts, right? Even before DeepSeek had shown it could be done.
I want to give others the opportunity
but in a lot of other areas, we are seeing entrepreneurs, right, have those guts. I mean, we are sending, we are building new rockets, we are launching new kinds of hyperspectral imaging satellites and so on. So we are beginning to see entrepreneurs, right, have that can-do spirit. And I'm sure we'll see much more of that even in AI development.
Yeah, just to add to this, when I look at the market space today and look at our own enterprises and their adoption to AI, I think it's reached a stage where they really want to do things that matter to the organizations and and cater to real use cases, which also is backed by a sense of having that kind of capacity being built in their respective organizations. So we are definitely there at the doorsteps of things. And if you were to take innovation, I think frugal innovation is the way that India is really moving ahead. The exorbitant costs of really model builders and doing things is an aberration at this point of time, right? But people have innovated in and around the resources that are there to make it very tenable for an Indian society, right? Many of the use cases that you see, and there's several of them, a broad spectrum across various areas of addressal, right? Whether it is natural language processing, energy efficiency, education, tech, whichever you take. So you're finding a lot of innovation and very India-specific utilities come into play, right? I strongly feel that there will be that many use cases for sure, but ability to use all of that for some meaningful results on the ground is something that people are focused on. And I think that's where the sovereignty part comes into play. You don't want to export data and import intelligence, as people say, right? So you want to harness your own data for your own benefit and see you can stay ahead of the curve. And that's the game where people are discussing today, at least at large levels of AI adoption. And it's not just one or two use cases today. Many enterprises are dealing with a few tens and 20s of use cases, and their ability to harness all of that together is also an area that I see as an opportunity for us.
Just one point to add to that. When we are talking about having our own, let's say, ChatGPT or an LLM model, as he was rightly pointing out on the capability and the competencies part, right? Most of the people, as on today, look at that there is a large language model and then they start leveraging it and using it. But what is also important is to invest in the fundamental research aspects, especially when it comes to the understanding of the transformer blocks, the neural networks. Because at the end of the day, developers are not to just say that I coded it and I'm done with it. It also has to have a purpose at the end of the day to see that it is doing some societal good, right? So if that has to happen, then they need to really get to the depths of it in understanding what are the parameters, how they are acting out, how do they react for certain data sets, and if there is a check on the data set that is being provided to it. So all of these fundamental aspects, okay, will actually form the foundations for the high-flying things. So if that is the case, then we are having a robust and a reliable India-owned model is how I see it.
And Dom, I'm a Brit, you're a German. How different is this conversation developing in Europe?
I think, I'm speaking as a German in general, the Germans think we know everything, which is not true. I mean, but I admit it publicly here. But I know we come across like this. I think that's the biggest issue in Europe, probably. Speaking just out, when you speak to startups there, I know Mistral, the French startup, is doing actually a decent job, but I think a little bit the thinking in Europe is hindered by the progress that the different countries made in the last 200 years, 300 years, being always at the forefront of things. Germans are known being the engineer leaders. Look, if we are really honest, where are they today, right? And I think that's a challenge, and it goes back. Just read this when we talked, and when Manish said that as well about reimagining intelligence, and I think it's so interesting that we talk a lot about technology, but it comes down to human behaviors and human thinking, and I think that's a challenge at the moment in Europe, that they kind of pausing a little bit and then think what they've accomplished is enough to move in a space where we are today, where I think Sebastian just said he can't predict the next 3 years. I would be curious how you say he does. I wouldn't be able to predict the next week, I feel like. Everything is changing so fast. I wouldn't do that, but that's my personal opinion. But
Well, we'll struggle when we get to that part of the interview.
Well, I'm reminded of this Alan Kay code. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. So that's what we try to do.
I love that.
So as these AI systems are developing, across the world, how do we hold them accountable when they fail? Who do we hold accountable when they fail? Avinash, perhaps we can bring you in.
I mean, if you step back, right, there are 3-4 stakeholders in this. There are business leaders who wants to invest and then get benefit out of it. I guess there are developers who will actually, do the work. There are regulators. They would be. I mean, as an industry, right? It's hard to say one particular function or person should be held accountable, because it is really a combination of all, and I think we all need to take a shared responsibility and accountability. But if we are to pick one, I think it needs to be business leadership, because I think the tone gets set at the leadership level in terms of what's our objective, what do we want to accomplish, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. That whole direction to the rest of us, I think it's driven more by the leadership level. And I mean, it could be a business leader, it could be a country leader, it could be, whatever those roles are. But I think it's really a collective responsibility. I mean, in terms of not only ethics part, but also I think some other repercussions. I mean, for example, sustainability. What's the impact of this on sustainability? There is a Japanese word for this whole concept called sampo yoshi. What it means is we look at anything what we do from 3 lenses. Is it good for seller? Is it good for buyer? And is it good for society? I think it needs to tick all the 3 boxes. So I think when it comes to even the regulations or the responsibility, right? I think all 3 of us need to keep that in mind in terms of unintended consequences about, what do we use, the whole Gen AI or AI for? Because it has its consequences, in terms of consume.
What about the specific challenge of biases in AI? So if we're talking about recruitment or lending and so on, how do we mitigate those and make sure that AI is working for everyone? Manish?
Yeah, so that's a very, again, interesting and still an open problem. So we've been doing a lot of work. Again, there's been, again, dozens of papers written, right, in terms of even research. And in fact, my team in India was amongst the first to start to study bias also in the non-Western context, because we have LLMs which might be encoding bias based on caste, based on religion. And again, what we have seen is, so we have in fact made a lot of some of those data sets public, as well as created benchmarks. So we created this benchmark called Cultural Benchmark Cube, which brought out, again, the cultural insensitivity, right, of some of these AI models when it comes to, for instance, generating images, biases that many of these LLMs carry based on even nationality. Like you prompt an LLM, a Venezuelan is, and it might say whatever, a certain word, right, which is derogative. So there is definitely a need to really do further work in mitigating these biases. So at least what at Google we have been doing is have articulated these as part of our AI principles, that you must build models in a manner that do not perpetuate and reinforce biases. So it starts at every stage. It starts right from the data set selection to building of models to deployment of products based on these models, that we do these audits to try and ensure. But I would still say it's not yet a solved problem. So there's also more research that needs to be done.
Can I ask a question I get asked from my students a lot? They ask us a lot when we do the ethics class in AI design, what about unconscious bias? So the bias you're not aware of, how do you manage that? I would be so curious what you say.
That's a very important question. And I can bet you, when we see so many of these even conscious biases, there's going to be no shortage of unconscious biases. Because we humans, right, carry so many of these unconscious biases. We often need those trainings and so on, right, for us to become conscious. And AI systems are often trained, right, based on data that's generated by humans. So in some sense, they're learning from us humans, right, the bad humans. So some of our behaviors, right, get encoded.
So fair to say, if we want to have better AI, we need to become better humans.
Yeah, I mean, I can share something here, Dominik, that what we have done, right? I think you will require a very robust AI governance board. I mean, for want of a better word, I'm saying this. And probably we should not restrict that only to internal folks. I think internal plus external, universities, academia, researchers, whatever, right? So that you have a different perspective. And I think, Manish talked about, you really need to know what that data is and what is the characteristics of that data, for sure. And I think you require a very regular mechanism of checking it. Like, I mean, what you know, but what you don't know, you don't know. And the only way to find that out is keep checking this. I think that's the mechanism we will have to build. And
I agree. So, and one thing which I just wanted to add is we also need to bring people with different disciplines together, because this is not just a problem for us technologists, because I feel we are not fully equipped to deal with various aspects. We need to bring in the sociologists, the ethicists, the psychologists, and so on. And in fact, with that in mind, we had made an investment of $1 million into this first Center for Responsible AI that was set up in India at IIT Madras, which is bringing together, again, people from very different disciplines and trying to, again, have those discussions and trying to come up with those frameworks, right? Where, again, you could have the right kind of, again, guardrails, right? Because you don't want to, again, back to the earlier theme, you don't want to disrupt innovation. You want innovation to continue, but you do want to put in the right kind of guardrails, right? So that you're reducing the chances of harm to people.
And I just want to move on to talk about jobs as well, because this is something that comes up time and time again. Over the next sort of 5 years, and I realize that future predictions are tricky, but over the next 5 years, what industries do you think are going to see the most opportunities from AI, and which ones are going to see the most disruptions? Caleb.
So this also goes back to the first question that we discussed, like what are the sectors that are getting impacted, benefited, and so on and so forth. But for me, a more thought-provoking question is something like, is AI going to be a kind of a job terminator? I don't think so. It, at the most, will be a kind of a job transformer, right? So at the end of the day, how we are wanting to upskill ourselves, reskill ourselves, right? So that we are up and ready for the kind of new job profiles that are coming up will make a big difference. And even in the case of Industrial Revolution, what did it do? It made people to walk from farms to factories, right? So it's basically a transformation of the job profile. The core of it is how we are able to get to a point of saying that, yes, we are having enough skills to be able to transform ourselves with the kind of the transformation that is happening in the jobs. So that would be the kind of the thing, and that goes across the board, across the sectors. And if that is taken care of, and if organizations invest in it, and there are good incentives, there is a conducive workplace for AI learning and practicing AI, I think there is no sector that will be untouched with AI, is what my opinion is.
Yeah, so I agree. So, I mean, what we are seeing some amazing capabilities are these cognitive capabilities. And I think it's our responsibility as the technology industry and so on to always develop these things in terms of augmenting human capabilities rather than substituting human capabilities, as well as for people who deploy. Because, I mean, with that, AI really becomes a very, very powerful assistant, right, to you, to augment your capacity to do things. So I think we are going to see, because of this tremendous so each and every person on the planet, right, will have at their disposal an amazingly powerful universal assistant, as well as a whole bunch of very specialized assistants, right, that will help them learn any skill that they want to pick up that helps them lead healthier lives, that helps them take care of whatever, shopping or other chores and so on. So we're going to have those amazing capabilities available to us as assistants, right? And I think it's important for us to then make use of those and not be afraid of, again, making use, because it's been a cliche, but it really holds true. I mean, when people say, look, AI is not going to replace a doctor, but a doctor who uses AI is going to make a doctor who doesn't use AI kind of appear very, very outdated.
Yeah, I would want to say that, it is fairly established to say that AI is going to help everyone. There's no debate around it. It's a question of how do you take that forward. And from an India perspective, I think, as I said, we have moved out of the shell-like situation that we were a couple of years ago to real conversations. I'm seeing, if I were to look at an industry split, BFSI is perhaps the largest in terms of adopting AI technologies for business purposes. Several of them are seeing this adoption for customer experience, for fraud management, and several use cases that are falling there. And manufacturing is not far behind, especially if you're looking at shop floor and efficiency improvements there. You're seeing them adapt as well. Healthcare, very interesting use cases, but in pockets. Again, the scale needs to happen. It's much more difficult for people there to adopt to because of the ensuing norms that they need to adopt into. Then there is education and other areas where you're seeing a lot of adoption. Holistically, what I see is that that spur in terms of adoption is growing. And how do you make that enabled to your organization is a big question. Who will walk the talk along with me? There's a lot of people bringing in technology. Technology has a roadmap. The organization has a roadmap. But how will you ensure both of them are married? And then you're getting the outcome that you need. The biggest question. That's where kind of whether you want to construct an AI factory or an AI house, an AI hospital, you need people who will help you around to put that together. And that's a lot of opportunity for people in the market space to dwell upon.
Dom, what about from a design perspective? What are the best ways to sort of incorporate human and AI partnerships in the design process?
Yeah, I think before we prepared to the talk today, I think I told you I believe it's actually the best time for designers and creatives at the moment, because there's a couple of things. AI is based on data, so it looks backwards. It's really hard to look forward, so you need a human to think about it. From a design perspective, we look a lot into how do I need to build a design system for ambiguity, because the machines can build and design everything in real time as it is needed, hyper-personalized. We know all these conversations. The question is, how do I differentiate and not look the same than anybody else? So from a design perspective, one of the things we look at is, what do I need to design as a system that is unique and pushes the boundaries of the machines for the outcome? And I think that augmentation and relationship between the human and machine is really interesting to observe in our day-to-day work, right? And then there's obviously the other perspective on it. What we heard from everybody is how are the machines becoming a part of our life, and how is that interaction? I agree with Manish that I think assistants or agents will make decisions on our behalf, right? And purchase a product, but not because the fridge is empty, because we had a workout this morning, but we had a fatty diet last night. So that means certain beverages can't be drunk. I can't drink today, or can drink today if I reduce something else. And so this is interesting, because if you think about that, it's like that relationship needs to build trust and needs to be designed. And I think that's where the human comes in, the designer come in, the creative people come in, and actually force that and set these boundaries and systems and guardrails for that relationship.
So from all of you, it sounds like it's not necessarily a case of replacing jobs, but it is a case of changing jobs. So Avinash, maybe you could tell us more about skills transformation in this regard.
Yes, I think this is the single most factor, in my opinion, which will differentiate in terms of how do you leverage this opportunity for all of us. It needs to get handled both at individual level in terms of being curious about it. Dom and I were talking about, and he was sharing some experience that he had some global leadership, and 80% of them had not even opened ChatGPT. In today's world, it's unthinkable. So I think, as an individual, I think we all need to be curious enough about, how do we learn things here? I mean, for example, in our company, we kind of have made this mandatory that everybody goes to a white belt and a yellow belt, and I decided to do that first before I can tell everybody, saying that, why didn't you do it, right? So I think sometimes you have to lead the way. But also I think organizations, governments, companies, institutions, they need to provide that framework, environment, investment, so that these trainings are available. I mean, you can take horse to the water, ultimately horse needs to drink. But I think both things are required. And you also are going to need a different skill here in terms of how do you manage AI. You talked about the biases, ethics. So I think all of us also will require that skill in terms of how do we regulate but not regulate. You need to have that balance, right? So I think we'll have to think about that as well as a skill development. I do see that's an opportunity. And also I think India is well placed in that, going back to what Manish said earlier. I mean, you have tremendous talent potential, number of startups. We have an Indian word for frugal innovation called Jugaad. And I think people will figure out a way, in a different fashion.
What about specifically from an education perspective? So what children are learning in schools now, does that need to change? Does everyone need to have a more solid foundation in data? Ranganath and then Dom, I'd like to hear from you as well.
Yeah, I think that's needed in the context of everything. And I see a lot of opportunities that the universities have already incorporated. We see many organizations which are bringing in curriculums. And if you were to take a dipstick in terms of how many students are enrolling towards AI-based courses today, you'll find a grouping there which is pretty much oriented towards learning anything in and around AI. But I'm glad that, there is a 360-degree approach to AI today from the country perspective, right? You have legislation which is almost in par with the technology growth. your people who are tracking technology on a daily basis, and I do agree that whatever I spoke 3 months back to now, there is a large shift, and I might be speaking entirely different now. So, but we are tracking everything there, and it's translating on to the education and to the future generation as well. And today, if we were to look at AI adoption in schools and colleges, it's there for primary school children and upwards as well. And from a government perspective, there is a lot of push and effort to really educate, focus people there. The only thing around education that I think can be incorporated is in terms of telling them what happens if you don't get into that AI space today, right? It's being just pushed to say you need to kind of up your ante there, but what happens if you don't do that is something that we need to focus on as well.
So one thing which I want to add, I think two things which are very important, and one is the focus on fundamentals, because all of this AI and so on is ultimately built on these very, very strong mathematical foundations. So I think teaching students the right mathematical foundations is extremely important. The other thing which is very important is just learning to learn. Everybody, each and every one of us has to commit to lifelong learning. Things will keep changing because today it's whatever, this LLM technology. Tomorrow it will be something else and so on. So I think we've got to just accept the fact that technology will keep evolving at a very, very fast pace, and we have to be willing to learn new things. And as long as we have those fundamentals and we are willing to learn, the rest will fall in place. And in fact, there's also like an opportunity, AI opportunities white paper that my company Google launched some time back. It basically calls out 3 aspects, right? There is this investment for a country, right? An investment the country has to make in this AI infrastructure, investment that has to be made in skilling people, and then the push to make these services more usable, more accessible. And there has to be, again, AI is a technology which is going to transform every aspect, every industry, every aspect of the world. So I would say that, yes, every individual pretty much would have to have at least some basic level of understanding of AI as a technology.
Caleb, I want to hear from you, and then also from your academic perspective as well. Caleb?
Just to add on the fundamental knowledge part, there is this humorous illustration between Holmes and Watson. So one day on a camping trip, they were sound asleep inside a tent after having some heavy liquid refreshment. In the middle of the night, Holmes wakes up, nudges Watson, asks him to look into the sky. And he asks, "What do you see?" So Watson says, "I see stars and more stars." So Holmes asks Watson, "What does that mean for you?" So he starts answering it this way. He says, "Astronomically, it tells me that there are potentially billions of planets and millions of galaxies. Astrologically, it tells me that Saturn isn't Leo. Meteorologically, it tells me that tomorrow would probably be a beautiful day. Orologically, it tells me that it's about 2:45 in the morning. And theologically, it tells me that this is a vast universe and we are just a tiny part of it." So he asked back Holmes, "What do you think?" Holmes says, "Watson, you idiot, somebody has stolen our tent." So the fact of the matter is, the AI as a tent can fly, but the pegs that we actually put to it, which are nothing but the fundamentals like what Manish was saying, in terms of the optimization algorithms, the probability and statistics theories that are there, are actually forming the fundamentals of AI to fly like that. So if we hold that as a grip, then we can actually master AI and then go forward and then leverage it to our own usages that we have.
Tom, how are universities and even younger schools approaching this?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with Caleb and Manish. I built a business on this, right, with the academy, on upskilling people. But I think we had a conversation last year with Georgetown University, who looped us in and said, what do we need to do as faculty in order to teach the right things for people when knowledge is available infinitely at any time at the fingertips. And our faculty at Pratt asked the same question. I think the designers are prone to a bit more scared about the topic. And we come back with the same answer all the time. With Georgetown, we kind of evolved their system of teaching into more critical thinking, understanding the context of knowledge that's being shared, because that's a really important topic to what we heard earlier about judging what the output is, and is this the right output, and putting things in context. And then with the faculty in design schools, we're talking a lot about if you teach color composition, if you teach the right kind of metrics, if you teach design systems, you have to continue doing that, because just because a machine can build it doesn't mean it's good, right? How do you judge it? How do you actually go in and explain it? So I think while I said we're teaching how to use these machines and how to interact with them, I think one of the biggest parts of our own curriculum and how we actually talk with universities, with Miami, with the university in Lucerne, we have a lot of universities that come to me and my partner to actually talk about this topic. And it is about really honing in on critical thinking, on understanding contextual connections, and understanding how to actually, what to do with the data that is available to you. And the creative part is huge. I don't think you need a creative title to be a creative person. I'm pretty sure my fellow speakers here are all very creative people as well.
And you know, the title of this panel, Reimagining Intelligence, presumably the future of AI, when we talk about AGI, artificial general intelligence, that would be a massive breakthrough in terms of reimagining intelligence. Is that a question of if, or is that a question of when? Who wants to take that?
So interestingly, DeepMind started out as this startup. It was founded with that vision of basically building AGI systems. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, in fact, last week, I was in London and I heard Shane Legg, who was one of the co-founders. He said, in fact, the whole field of AI started with that famous workshop at Dartmouth, where in fact the vision that was laid out was, again, for it being essentially a very general capability, right, on par with human intelligence. And over the years, they saw what took off were these very, very specific kind of areas in which AI was being successful. And they wanted to bring back that emphasis on building those broad capabilities. And in fact, Shane Legg had predicted, I think way back in 2000s, early 2000s, that AGI should kind of arrive by somewhere around the year 2026 or something. And he said, or maybe it was 2028. So at least people like Shane Legg and Demis Hassabis and so on, their view is that there's now a reasonable chance, roughly maybe a 50% chance of having these AGI capabilities in the next 5 years. I think we are all, in my view is, I'm also reminded of this quote, the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So I think we are going to see some amazing capabilities, these cognitive capabilities, some of which we have already started to see, but we are going to see, again, some amazing capabilities of these AI models within the next 3 to 5 years, which will make us kind of, in fact, look at them in terms of the AGI definition, right, as pretty much almost being there. But I do see we will continue to have open challenges with these systems. We already have seen problems of hallucination, problems that, yes, they are often able to reason things, but they miss out on very simple things which a 5-year-old would know how to think straight, right, about those problems. So my view is we are going to continue to see some of those open areas where AI models will continue to struggle. And as a researcher, I am very optimistic that there will be amazing, no shortage of very interesting and challenging problems, right, for us to continue to tackle. But we are going to see, again, AI models being very broadly applied to transform many, pretty much all of the industries, many aspects of the world.
So it will seem like a AGI, but it won't actually be fully AGI. Is that sort of roughly what the rest of the panel thinks?
I mean, I'm saying AGI is likely to be there, but with some wrinkles.
So as Manish was pointing out, it's actually, there is a divided opinion on this, because the definition of AGI itself is not very clear as of now. And people are already talking about just not AGI, but super intelligent AI, right? I would like to say that we are at the juncture where we are moving from narrow AI to AGI, right? But then only time will tell when will we achieve it. But then for that, I am just reminded of how do we even define general intelligence. So you remember this, one of the great chess players, Gary Kasparov, was put against Deep Blue, right? And then he lost it. And people after that said that, okay, fine, we have achieved the human intelligence in the computer. One of the guys who was putting his views out, he said that, see, at least Gary Kasparov had feelings of sadness after he lost. Does that machine have that feelings? Is it planning to take deep pink for a date on that night after it won? No, right? So to really say that it has achieved general intelligence or it will go to super intelligence, it's like a far-fetched thing, and the opinions are formed. I would say that it is either opti-pessimistic or pesi-optimistic kind of a picture is where we are in.
But yeah, I will also refer to you, there has been a paper written by Google DeepMind researchers on levels of AGI, where they define different levels. So there are more formal definitions so that it becomes at least a little less ambiguous of have we reached. But yes, I mean, in general, I also think our bar will keep raising higher, that as we achieve some of these levels, we will continue to strive for more.
Yeah, to me, agentic AI is somewhere in that route, right? Directionally in that phase, and we are speaking a lot about it. We're talking of that being incorporated in our work streams and utilization there. I think that's the step towards AGI. And where we will land, we leave it to the guys who are making that. But nevertheless, I think, it's the area that we will be directionally headed towards, right? More of automation, more of capability that is integrated. And how do you ensure all of that work together will be the biggest challenge? Because the more complexities you start to bring in, and if you try to layer out all elements, it's a huge set of, a portfolio of things that needs to mesh together. And that's going to be the biggest challenge for people to look for. But theoretically, yes, we'll be seeing a lot of AGI.
I do want to leave time for questions from the audience as well, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on whether the world is even ready for AGI. So if this big breakthrough did happen, what would be the sort of immediate consequences of that? How would it just cause chaos? Would it be a good thing? What are your thoughts on sort of the challenges versus the optimism?
Yeah. So I do think this is something that requires a lot deeper, a lot more work. And again, because the implications are going to be very, very profound. And in fact, again, there's been an activity that's been kicked off in Google DeepMind, and we are doing a lot of thinking around that. But we believe, again, there needs to be a lot more. Because how would we learn? How would we, take care of ourselves? A lot of things will change as AGI arrives.
I would say, as far as I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there's no AI out there that is sitting around and thinking about what are these people are talking about. This is not happening, right? And I think I'm always fascinated, and I think a little bit kind of shocked how blind we sometimes pick up on stories that are being put out for reasons that have probably bigger implications on humanity and just be used to actually serve their own purposes. And so I think one of the things that's super interesting about the topic is I don't think there is a concept about super intelligence, but a lot of people talking about it. But I haven't seen any theory or hypothesis what that actually means. So let's go step by step, right? And will it feel like AGI to Manish's point? Yeah, it probably already does. Ethan Mollick said it. We had a call this week and we talked a little bit about it, and it might feel very much that the machine thinks on its own, but it doesn't, right? And I think just sometimes grounding in reality is maybe a super helpful topic. I said it earlier, I wouldn't be able to predict AGI, but I can't imagine it is around the corner, right? And I just, the computing power is not there. How the transformer models at the moment eat data is like crazy and outrageous. And so I don't think we have the right models yet. I think you said that as well, to get there. But do we want that? And do we need that is the question. And I think we all need to answer that for ourselves a little bit. But I think maybe we start by figuring out how to use that in an efficient and sustainable way today. And then we can think about
what happens if these machines start to think about us and about things themselves. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, interesting, definitely. Let's hear from questions from the audience. Then, yes, the woman over here, please. Maybe we need another microphone. Oh,
Okay,
there we
sorry.
go.
Hi, Deborah. I'm a reporter with Reuters News. I have a very specific, enterprise-specific question for everyone across the panel. Do you think there's a notable gap between the AI initiatives that companies are putting their money in and the productivity and profitability results that they can actually show? I mean, across industries, IT, healthcare, consumer, of course, Dominik, and then specifically to Manish. This is a conversation, at least on Wall Street, there's a sort of concern that there's billions being invested, and there's a notion that there should be more than a very clever AI assistant to show for it. What are your thoughts on that? I know it's a two-parter, but thanks.
Somehow the audio, did I understand? You wanted to see, is there a gap between, again, the promise of AI and the actual benefits being realized? So, I mean, there is a certain element of maybe AI being hyped, but I think it's hyped for the short term. And I think there's a level of overhyping in the short term and underhyping in the long term. So I think the technology is very real and it is very transformative. Some of it is also dependent on how, as an enterprise, are you applying it? Because there are a lot of enterprises which tend to first utilize technology in fringe cases because they're not ready to bet the farm, right, on some of their core, core use cases. So they prefer to first experiment with kind of certain areas, right, which are a bit outside the core. And obviously, then they are disappointed, right, in the kind of value that they are seeing when they are not kind of applying it to the core. But I think there are many, many companies which are being very, again, innovative, which are applying it to the very core of their business. I can say, even as a technology company, I mean, Google kind of announced itself as an AI-first company. And I'll give you one very simple example. Around the year that deep learning made the comeback, right, of those image classification algorithms and so on. That's around the time Google Photos was also being designed as a product. When they looked at that capability, they completely reimagined Google Photos as a product. They took this capability to take any image, any photo, and being able to automatically tag what's inside as a given and design the product based on that assumption. Of course, it wasn't there on day one, but all those capabilities, right, started getting better. So I think it's also a matter of how much of conviction do you have, how much of a risk you're willing to place, and the capabilities will get better with time.
I can just answer that. What we see from enterprises today is that many of the organizations jumped into the AI bandwagon, right? The CEO was asking, IT had to deliver an AI project. They went ahead and did the easiest one that they can demonstrate. That's what they did. So that's the phase of experimentation that we saw. And I think we have crossed that. We have reached a phase where people are looking for real outcomes from AI projects. That's one issue. And the second issue that I saw was that all AI implementations were in silos. They really didn't connect to each other. So an organization didn't see the return on investment for investments done. You don't want to burn GPU power for identifying a cat and a dog, right? You want to real outcome out of it. And that's where, the entire industry has moved towards. Today, when we speak to organizations, we know that we are speaking for real, implementations enterprise-wide. That's where we are headed to. So I think in the next future, we have learned from what we had to learn during the POC phases that we see. But implementation is what lies ahead.
I know the audience have a lot more questions for you. I have a lot more questions for you. This has been a fascinating discussion. We are, unfortunately, out of time. So please, everyone, a round of applause for our panelists.